Hey everybody, I'm Skylar Zander, the State Director for Americans for Prosperity Florida. I am sorry that Tim Phillips cannot be on today, so you'll just have to deal with me. But fortunately, we have an incredible person with us today. She represents God's country, if we're being honest about it. She represents Florida's Congressional District 3, which encompasses my hometown of Clay County, runs through Gainesville, Ocala, Putnam counties. For those who are from those areas in Florida, you got an incredible Congresswoman fighting for you every day. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. And for our listeners all across the country, tell us a little bit about House District 3.
Awesome. Well, good to see you, Skylar. It is awesome that just, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, you and I were, I want to say, young kids running around and, knocking on doors and getting involved in the political process. And now look at us today. So good to be with you on this Facebook Live. But for all the folks watching, Florida's 3rd Congressional District is the Gator Nation. So of course, go Gators, have to do that. And is, as Skylar said, it is Ocala, so Marion County, Alachua, Putnam County, Bradford, Union, Clay, really, truly God's country. But it's also home to so much more in terms of production. We are home to the #1 biotech incubator in the world. We have world-class research facilities, manufacturers, incredible people, incredible natural resources. And I like to say it's the best part of Florida. So if you're ever in the area, make sure you stop in and you say hey.
Yeah, for all those folks who are listening in who think of Florida, all they think of is maybe Miami or Disney World. No, listen, you got to visit House District 3. Congresswoman, again, thanks for joining us. There's a lot going on, right? There is a massive $2 trillion infrastructure package that President Biden has proposed. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And then let's go into some of the details, because look, I don't know about you, but I'm very concerned about it. A lot of our audience is very concerned about it. And I think it's time we do more to bring this issue to the forefront.
Yeah, it's pretty discouraging right now, the level of spending that's going on across our country, really, truly just garnishing the wages of our kids and our grandkids. And I know you're the father to a couple of very youngins. And when you look at them, I'm sure your heart swells with joy and pride, but there's also that nagging feeling in the back of your head that says they already owe the government $60,000, $70,000 because of this reckless spending. And this so-called infrastructure package, which has less than 5% of actual real infrastructure in it, it's really just a giant Green New Deal and social engineering bill that they are asking American taxpayers to pay for. But what we really need is our roads fixed, our bridges fixed, infrastructure like rural broadband or broadband in underserved communities. That is what is going to drive economic development and growth, which allows us to continue to prosper and invest. But instead, what we're seeing is a narrative from the administration that says that we need social engineering. So we need social justice in our infrastructure because these are the networks that really keep society together. Not the family units, not churches, not communities, but these social engineering projects. And so it's really concerning that we are investing, or I shouldn't even say we, because this is strictly partisan. This is a Democrat-led initiative with zero Republican input. This is the Green New Deal and the social engineering of woke culture and the racial bias. I mean, I never knew that a highway could be racist, but according to our transportation secretary, that is a thing. But I think it's very important that we as Americans, especially those concerned about the fiscal health of our country and our children's future, that we start talking about this in a way that makes sense. At this point in time, not a single budget has been proposed in Congress. Typically, the party that is in the majority, they propose a budget that then gets reconciled. Obviously, the president's budget is just a suggestion, but the House is in charge of the purse strings. How can we be at all able to do our job of controlling the checkbook if we don't even have a budget to follow? So really, it's open season when it comes to the Americans' tax or the checkbook. And it's really, really concerning. One of the things that you and I were just talking about, and I don't want to get too off topic, but I'm in between votes right now. And today we're voting on a group of suspensions. Now, because of the frustration that Republicans have had with these suspension bills not being debated and calling for a roll call and having them individually debated on their own merit as standalone bills, Nancy Pelosi has decided she's going to wrap all of these bills into one called an en bloc. Now, these are all of these bills. I'm one of those crazy people that likes to read the bills. And
imagine that.
I know.
Imagine the idea of reading.
I know, it's a shocker. It drives people crazy because I say, well, I can't vote on it if I don't have time to read it. So oftentimes they're handing me bills to vote on that same day, and I just simply have to vote no. Because you got to remember, I came from a background where my family lost everything because some politicians in Washington didn't read the bill. So this group of bills that has gone on suspension, meaning that there's no debate in committee, there is no vetting in the proper committee of jurisdiction, there is no bipartisan support, there's no debate on the House floor, the rules are suspended, hence why they're called suspension bills, and they're brought for a vote immediately. This is coming to the House floor in block. This is billions of taxpayer dollars that we are spending without a single minute of debate on the House floor. This is crazy. What is the point of a representative government if the whole goal is to just ram these initiatives down the American taxpayers' throats? That's not what our founding fathers intended. So it's a very frustrating process, and you can expect more of the same from the Democrats and those on the left. I hate to make it so political, but we are seeing a tremendous push on party lines with zero conservative input.
Yeah, the frustrating thing for us as an independent group, as a nonpartisan organization that doesn't focus on a Democrat or Republican, electing Democrats or Republicans, what frustrates us so much too is to see that the boundary line is trying to shift, right? I mean, it's constantly, well, it's not bipartisan. If it's bipartisan if the poll numbers show great numbers versus, actually getting other representatives on board with certain plans that are trying to be pushed. And I mean, look, you're talking about an infrastructure plan. If you can call it an infrastructure plan, that's the other infuriating thing, right? Is that, can you genuinely call this an infrastructure plan when it has so many things outside of infrastructure, the traditional infrastructure that, folks back home worry about, their roads, the bridges that they're driving over. This does nothing to take care of those things. It does so much more than that. It's just a reckless spending bill. And I know we can go on and on about it, but let's shift gears and talk about something else that's going to the Senate floor that was also rammed down your throat. And that was it's S1 now in the Senate, but it was H1 in the House, the complete overtake of the elections. And tell us a little bit, from your perspective, how you feel about that. We're scared. It completely politicizes the FEC. It could hurt nonprofits in a major way. I mean, you've seen non-traditional folks on the center left come out in opposition because of how it might affect the nonprofits. So talk to us a little bit about H1, now S1 in the Senate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that HR1 should be the thing that really keeps Americans up at night, because it fundamentally changes how we hold our elections, who we are as a representative government, as a constitutional republic. And in the House version, what we saw was really a federalization of our elections, truly in stark contrast and violation to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 and 3 of the United States Constitution, that says that states are responsible for determining the time and manner in which the elections are conducted. This would strip states of their power, truly an assault on the 10th Amendment if there ever was one, and really, really scary that you will now have federal agencies politicizing elections and overseeing them. Tucked in this bill is things like stripping voter ID requirements from both registering to vote, but also voting itself. It expands ballot harvesting. It does a 6-to-1 match on donations. So if there is a political donation that you, Skylar, give to a candidate of your choice, we'll just say AOC, since she's a very well-known individual. Say you.
Yeah, we talk all the time. Actually, we're texting friends.
I'll have to check her FEC records to see if I find your name on there. Doubtful, but let's just hypothetically say that you, Skylar, give $100 or $200 to AOC. Well, that 6-to-1 match automatically triggers that 6 times the match of your donation goes from the American taxpayers to her campaign, regardless of whether those taxpayers agree with that. Sorry, that's the voting bell. Sorry. It's not a fire alarm. It's not a drill. This is the old school United States Congress way of letting us know that we have votes coming up, but it's okay. We have a little bit of a buffer. But the thing that I tell people is, take this even a little bit more broadly. So a lot of the donations that people like AOC receive are small dollar donations classified as $200 or less. So if she raises $1 million on some inflammatory statement, like we're going to defund the police and get rid of incarceration, or you name it, it could be anything. She raises $1 million, the American taxpayers are on the hook for $6 million to her campaign. That is a very real scenario, because we've seen her raise millions of dollars in this way, where it then becomes a competition amongst politicians. Who can say the more outrageous, inflammatory, crazy thing that is going to fire up their base, and then we were going to see them raise money off of it. So it's that component. It is really an undermining of our electoral process. It politicizes the Federal Election Commission, as you mentioned. This truly would ensure that Republicans and conservatives never really win elections again. It's pretty horrific what we're seeing, this assault on our constitutional rights. And the reason why H.R. 1 is so scary right now is because there's the threat that the filibuster is going to get blown up in the Senate, which is really the only thing that's holding the line between the radical agenda that Nancy Pelosi in the House is pushing and the Senate is not passing it. But if this filibuster goes away, or they magically are able to find enough Republicans who will support S1, then we could be in for a really, really tough couple of years until conservatives get the House back. So really scary stuff. It's the #1 priority of Nancy Pelosi, as evidenced by the fact that this is H.R. 1. The first 10 bills of any Congress are the top 10 priorities for that Congress. So this is clearly their #1 initiative that they will put a lot of time, money, and resources into.
What's amazing to me is that, like you said, and I've talked to Floridians yesterday. I was in Jacksonville, and when I told them that this was HR 1 and S1, that this was the #1 priority, they said, "Are you kidding me? Shouldn't we be focused on COVID recovery? Why are we talking about elections? We just had those. I care about putting food on the table for my kid right now. Yes. I care about trying to get my kid exercise after school, and you're talking about elections. Let's move on. Let's talk about getting our kids. Let me go back to work."
Exactly. And well, labor and work and unemployment is a whole nother issue that we're dealing with. But the thing that I find interesting is the messaging on this. The Democrats have been very, very quick. Speaker Pelosi has been very quick to say this was the most secure election of our lifetime. And yet they turn right around and they want to fundamentally change everything about our elections. It's like they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. And again, the minute that you get the federal government involved in local elections, in taking and usurping that authority of the states to determine the time and manner in which elections are conducted, the federal government can't even run the post office. You want to put them in charge of elections? This is crazy. So I just really, really think that people need to step back and see this for what it is. It is a politically motivated power move to ensure elections in the future. They're even looking in this bill at dropping the voting age to 16. I don't know about you, but I still read stories in the news about 16-year-olds eating Tide Pods. that's not exactly someone who gives me a lot of confidence that they're, acing their civics classes and have the wherewithal to be casting a ballot at the age of 16.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that you said, Congresswoman, that I think is a really good transition is, if you don't mind, just transitioning real quick, and this will probably be our last piece before you have to go vote, is the filibuster. You mentioned the filibuster. A lot of our activists across the country are very concerned about the filibuster being thrown out, taken out with the trash, if you will, when this is a time-honored tradition. This is something that the Senate has installed. Republicans and Democrats of the past have all said we have to protect the minority in some instances. So talk to us a little bit about the importance for our activists to continue to call people, especially those in the majority, and say, please keep the filibuster. Of all things, let's make sure that we're protecting minority voices in Congress right now.
Absolutely. I think that the filibuster really is the last line of defense, if you will, that we have in keeping this radical agenda of really spending our kids' future from happening. Right now, the power that President Biden has is really with his pen. Via executive order, he can do a lot of damage, but it's not codified. So the minute that there is a transition, that can all be undone very quickly. Now, if it is a actual House and Senate and it's signed by the president, that turns into a totally different dynamic. And I never thought in a million years that I would be seeing Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin as the champions of the filibuster. But I think that it says quite a bit about the threat of blowing the filibuster up, that even those on the left recognize the importance of protecting the minority and letting the minority have a say in the process. Because at the end of the day, we are not just Republicans versus Democrats, we're all Americans. And I think when you disregard the voice of the minority, like what we are seeing in the House right now, where you're seeing these suspensions going en bloc with no debate, when you're seeing the refusal of members to co-sponsor bills with folks that have objected to certification in January, when you see this hyper political state that's playing out in the House, that's very dangerous for the Senate, and they recognize that, because history tells us that parties come and go in terms of power, and there's always that constant change. If they remove the filibuster, it's not like it gets automatically reinstated when the Republicans take power again. It's gone. And so there's a definite pause and cause for concern that the left has, that if they do this, all bets are off, because they know, and the history is telling us, the redistricting that's happening in 18 months is telling us, the polling is telling us that Republicans are going to take the House back. And eventually they're going to take the Senate and then the White House. And with the filibuster blown up and gone, that is a very dangerous precedent for the Democrats, and they don't want to see that go away. So right now, it's very frustrating that things like HR 1280, the defund police bill, is getting passed through the House, but it's stuck in, the good thing is it's stuck in the Senate. There's a lot of garbage, gun grabbing bills, HR 8. We're about to see a really, really tough bill on healthcare and prescription drug prices that's going to be coming up in the House next week. That's ultimately going to pass the House, but our hope is that it'll die a very slow and painful death in the Senate. But that only happens if we maintain and keep the filibuster. So the thing that I would encourage members to do is please call your senators, encourage them, politely, of course, but encourage them to protect the voice of the minority, because it goes both ways. Encourage them to keep the filibuster in place, because it really makes it so that members have to focus on bipartisanship and common ground to advance causes that are good for our country, not for our party. And I think that is the most important message that your members and our folks in AFP can do is, again, hammering that message home. We need to advance things that are bipartisan, that are good for the country, not for a party. And that is something that is more powerful than any email or fax or text message. Make sure that you're hitting those phone lines, because I can tell you, once you light up the Capitol switchboard and there's nothing else that a member can do but sit there and answer phones with their teams, that is a very, very powerful message. So make sure you're hitting those phone lines. And thank you guys so much for being engaged and a part of the process. Honestly, it is groups like AFP that are really, really critical to keeping us on track and preserving our nation's future for that next generation.
Well, I couldn't have thought of a better way to end it. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate all the hard work that you're doing. And if you're joining us here live, in the chat, we're putting links in. Our amazing producer, Emily Green, is dropping links in the comment box for you guys to look at, so you can get in contact with your senator and make sure that they're not passing and getting rid of the filibuster, that they don't put through a $2 trillion quote unquote transportation package. So continue to fight with us. I would encourage you to look up Congresswoman Cammack on social media as well. Thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.